Almost time. I have two agendas. Are these really truly two separate agendas? Okay. No, 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 because I'm looking at the joint meeting online and there's two of them online. Oh, okay. Well, with that clarification, I'm going to move to, actually, I'm going to call the meeting to order for the May 21st, 2024 special joint Board of Supervisors and Planning Commission meeting. It is 3 o'clock. And with that, I'm going to ask, I'm sorry, I have to look to see who I'm asking. Who am I asking? The Supervisor Zanger, will you lead us in the pledge? Okay, can I get an acknowledgement certificate of posting?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Do we say 5-0 or 10-0? I mean, actually, do we have everybody? We're missing 9-0. Okay. Okay, so then we're going to, we don't have to do any items because it's special, not on the agenda. Okay, 1A, so this is receive presentation from RMA on the San Benito General Plan Housing Element Update.
Thank you.
Hi.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board, members of the Planning Commission. Really great to see you again for the second time in the last month. Within the last month, this is in regards to the housing element update. As you know, we did have a previous meeting on April 30th to discuss the housing element update. We had a good dialogue. There were some questions that came up, and so with the purpose of today's Joint Planning Commission Board of Supervisors meeting is essentially to respond to those questions throughout the presentation, and to also inform you that the draft housing element update did get released for public review on May the 10th. And that's a 30-day review period, which ends on June 10th. And there's opportunity to get feedback. We're soliciting feedback today. As you know, as I mentioned, we're going to solicit feedback from the public at tomorrow's workshop at Payne's at 6 o'clock. And looking forward to addressing all comments, all questions, and responding to the draft housing element update with that. And so, but for now, we do have Kimberly Horn, who is here and is going to be providing us with the presentation on today's meeting. So with that, Brian De La Torre will be coming up to provide us a presentation. Right?
Thank you, Abraham. Again, my name is Brian De La Torre with Kimberly Horn. Nice to see you all again. I know we met not too long ago. A lot of this will be familiar. There are some changes, and I'll highlight some of those changes since the last time we saw this document. But again, like Abraham mentioned, the public review draft was posted in its entirety on May 10th. So the public has the county is required to allow at least 30 days for public review, and then an additional 10 days to consider any public comments, and then that's when we can formally submit to the Housing and Community Development Department of the state. Again, I want to reiterate as well, this is not the only time to provide public comment, but this is those 30 days are essentially the deadline to be considered for the draft that's going to be submitted. So yeah, we want to go through just again the overview of the housing element. I know we did this last time, so I'll fly through that. If you need me to slow down, please let me know. And then we'll go over the sites identified to accommodate RENA. That's where we see some changes. And then we'll go through the public review draft, how to access it, how the public can find it and provide feedback, and then next steps. So again, the housing element is a required element of the general plan. So it's the only one that needs to be updated regularly. Now with new legislation, the safety element will also need to be updated along with the housing element. So that's partly true that it's the only one that needs to be updated regularly because the safety element will as well. But the intent of the housing element is to identify housing need and identify how the county can address that need. The housing element, an important part is the sites that are identified, as well as the programs meant to address housing issues, housing need, affordability, and we include our programs in I believe it's chapter 6 of the document, and that's where you can find the programs. In Appendix B, that's where you can find the sites. So this document is certified by the state through the Housing Community Development Department. So once we submit formally, we'll have two reviewers from the state who will review the document for compliance with housing element law. If it's not fully compliant, they'll provide comments in which we will respond and post another draft for the public to review as well, and then go from there. So the intent is to get certified, and there's a couple consequences for non-certification. So the biggest one that we feel is the limit to access to state funding, grants, different programming. So here I have a couple examples of funding. So CDBG, that's a huge one. When we're applying for CDBG, that having a certified housing element is one of the requirements. And then for other funding, like the home grant here, the second one, which partially funded the Riverview 2 project, it's on essentially a grading basis. So if you have a certified housing element, you have a higher grade, higher priority for funding. And then you have like PLHA, the Local Housing Trust Fund program, and then infill infrastructure program. So all of these either require a certified housing element or give us better priority for access to that. The second one is lawsuits. So this can come from private parties. This can come from the California Attorney General, and it can come from just any private parties. So with these lawsuits, there's a variety of litigation and consequences to that, but some of the biggest ones is mandatory compliance. So if it's the Attorney General, for example, we're far from that, but there are some jurisdictions that are out of compliance, halfway into the sixth cycle, and they tell them you need to be certified as soon as possible. Again, suspension of local control, which is part of part 3 that we'll go into, and again, fees, so being penalized for not having a certified housing element. The last one, which is a lot more common that we hear about now, is the builder's remedy. So this comes directly from the Housing Accountability Act. So there's specific projects that are eligible under the Housing Accountability Act that can be proposed, and if they have a certain amount of affordability component in them, the county may not have the ability to have local control over that development. It may just go straight to the state, and they can approve it at the state level. There's very specific projects that fall into that. It's not every single one, but here we have the government code section, which is housing accountability. So I just want to go quickly through our housing elements today. So I know we had our joint meeting end of April. We had a workshop in September of last year. We had the joint kickoff for the housing element program. Tomorrow we have our community workshop. So we'll have that at Ping's Restaurant, banquet room. So the housing element will be part of the workshop, kind of a bigger workshop to go over many issues like the general plan and how the housing element plays into that effort. So that'll be tomorrow, and staff will be there. I'll be there. And anyone listening online, there's appetizers and refreshments, which is always exciting. So we go into our candidate sites. These are sites that we've identified to accommodate our need, our arena. We selected these sites for a variety of reasons. One of the biggest reasons was vacancy, available infrastructure, zoning, so existing zoning on those parcels, and then access to services, public transportation, we just mentioned utilities, infrastructure. And when we identify these sites, we want to identify them in line with the concept of affirmatively furthering fair housing. So we want to make sure that we can identify housing sites that are not concentrated in one specific area or by one specific income category. To identify these sites, we selected 12 sites to rezone to increase capacity and increase that capacity to be sufficient to accommodate higher density. So in second, we'll go into the site specifically, but this rezone, which we're terming residential high rezone, it has two sub areas. So 11 of the 12 parcels fall into subzone A, which has a density range of 25 to 45 dwelling units per acre. And there's one parcel, which we'll see in a second, that is subzone B, that falls into 45 to 65 dwelling units per acre. This is our total candidate sites analysis. So at the very top, we'll see our arena broken down by income. We have 754 total. Approximately 2/3 of that is in the low, extremely low, very low, and low income category. And then we have about another third in the moderate and above moderate categories. And then we broke down, once we have our arena, we chipped away at that arena, our need by projecting our ADU construction. So we used past ADU trends and projected that out for 8 years. And then we have our pipeline projects, which are projects that are already approved and haven't been permitted yet, or are approved and have been partially permitted, but still has outstanding building permits to award. So that will fall into pipeline projects. This also includes projects that are currently in review, that are active in the review process. And then lastly, in that white line, we have our units that have already received certificate of occupancy during this planning cycle, which is June 30th, 2023, up until December 30th of 2030. So as of now, we have it at 88. This is only going to continue increasing, and as that increases, we'll continue adding that to this. So then, as you see at the bottom, it says net remaining need. So somehow it worked out. We didn't plan this. It's totally a coincidence that there was a zero need for each one of these at the end. We have an overage for moderate and above moderate, but for extremely low and low income, the remaining net need was like exactly zero. We don't have any more. We don't have any less. It's exactly what our need is. In an ideal world, that'd be perfect, but we know that developments don't always play out the way they're planned for a variety of reasons. So for that reason, we wanted to increase capacity so that we can accommodate additional sites, just in case some of these parcels don't develop or are slow to develop. We have additional sites that can accommodate our need. So you can see at the bottom, these are the rezone sites. So we have through both the subzone A and subzone B of the rezone, you can accommodate 2,696 units, and they're all broken down by income category. We have an even mix of vacant and non-vacant parcels that fall into it. So we've accommodated them on parcels based off their capacity, expected rezone density. And at the bottom, we have our total capacity. So you can see our total capacity is over our real need, and this is, this is what can be built out. It's not necessarily what will be built out. All right. So then we go into our sites here. So what we'll see is that there's two residential rezones. In the draft, I think we're going to change the colors just so it's easier to follow. But in the green, which we'll zoom into here, the green are sites that are going to be rezoned. So these are all parcels that are rezoned. In that orange, those are those pipeline projects. So projects that have either been approved but haven't pulled permits, have some parcels, have some building permits pulled, but not all of them, or projects that are currently under review. So here specifically, we'll see on the bottom right corner that used to be a site. It's no longer there. This was an orchard here to the right of R11. Yes, R11. That was a parcel. We removed that based off feedback, and then we added another site elsewhere, which we'll see in this. So all these parcels in the green that we see here all fall into subzone A. So all of those are proposed to be 25 to 45 dwelling units per acre. Right, and then we go into the east. So we have all these parcels remain the same. The rezone parcels remain the same, and again, these would fall into subzone A. So it would be 25 to 45 dwelling units per acre for the rezone sites. And then here, notice that our kind of inset at the top right cut off R12, but R12, which is at the top right, the call out was cut off. That top one up there, that's R12. So that's the only parcel that is identified in subzone B. So currently that's like a storage facility, and that would be proposed to be 45 to 65 families per acre. So that's adjacent to the Holiday Inn Express, and the other hotel across the street is, but that would fall in line with similar densities as the hotels there. So we believe that density would be, wouldn't stick out in that area, but all other rezone sites that you see on this map would be subzone A, so it would be 25 to 45 families per acre. So I know we got some questions in the last meeting, and we just want to clarify for potential annexations. So this is straight out of the government code. This is for the housing element portion of the government code. I'm not going to read through all of it, but essentially, if the city of Hollister was to annex sites that were identified for the county's housing element, they would essentially take on that arena. So if we, examples, parcel R2 here, if we identified that parcel in the county's housing element to accommodate 100 units, that 100 units would transfer over to the city. So the city would be required to accommodate the arena, and it would remove our requirement for those 100 units. So our arena need would be reduced, and the city's would be increased. Because we no longer have jurisdiction over that parcel, we aren't required to accommodate anything on that parcel. Yeah, so this is the government code. It's long. There's additional context below it when you look at the government code. But I'll read this last sentence. So the city and the county may reach a mutually agreeable, acceptable agreement for transfer of a portion of the county's allocation, so RENA, to the city, which shall be accepted by the Council of Governments, so on and so forth. For the county, it would be the Council of Governments, so SB. It is a mutual agreement. Once that agreement is made, it'll be with your council, the city's council. Once come with the agreement, it just sends it over to the COG, and then the COG will coordinate on your behalf with each city. And then once that's done, there's an adjustment to that requirement. So then in the next reporting year, in the annual reporting period, reporting report, it should be adjusted. And then again, we want to reiterate that affirmatively furthering fair housing, AFFH, is not a new concept. For the housing element, HCD has placed much more emphasis on this. So the definition of AFFH in the government code is taking meaningful actions in addition to combating discrimination that overcomes patterns of segregation, fostering inclusive communities, free from barriers that restrict access to opportunity based on protected characteristics. So the way we do this is through various programs, by identifying sites equitably, and by not concentrating sites. So in the housing element, in the policy section, you'll see various programs meant to attract development across various income categories. The county can't restrict development in that sense, but we can attract a variety of development. Right, and then we want to go and look at the changes from the 5th and the 6th housing element. So in the 5th cycle, we have many of the programs that were rolled into the 6th cycle. So many programs that were kind of ongoing were modified. Some of the metrics were modified so that we can report on them in the 6th cycle, and we can have metrics that are easier to quantify. So they were rolled in. Any programs that were completed, or any programs that were deemed insufficient or unnecessary for the 6th cycle were not rolled over. But a lot of new programs that were not in the 5th cycle were added into this new draft for the 6th cycle. Much of this was requirements of state law. You'll see here in these last bullets, SB 35 procedures. The county may already have procedures, but it needs to be posted publicly, so on the public website or in the zoning code, municipal code, as to the way we plan for emergency shelters and low barrier navigation centers. That was in 2022, so AB 2339 changes the way we plan for that. Various changes, a couple Senate bills regarding transitional and supportive housing as well, changes to reasonable accommodations, various AFFH changes that are reflected in our program. With that, we can go into Q&A in a second, but again, just want to reiterate that the draft is available for the public, so it's on the county's website. You have a link for the whole draft. If you just want to download specific sections, you can also download individual sections. On the web page, we have a link that takes you to a feedback form, so you can provide comments electronically for every specific section in there. And there's also a section to provide just overall comments. You don't have to comment on each specific section as well. So this draft is large. It's over 300 pages. But we hope that people can look at it. If there's any questions, we can answer those now. And the statutory review period is at least 30 days. And again, this is just the time that we'll be accepting comments to consider making changes before we respond. But we want to reiterate that we're going to be accepting comments throughout this whole process until we're certified. We'll be receiving comments, accepting comments, and considering these comments. So yeah, it's on the city's website. That's a link to get there, and then this graphic here, that's what you'll see on the county's website. You'll be able to download it or just view it, and then you'll be able to see the link there to provide your comments. The feedback form QR link is on the website as well. It'll look like that, but there's also just a regular link to access that. So the public, if there's any comments, you can send them a couple different ways. County email, specifically for housing element, the feedback form, and they can bring comments in person or mail them to our mail at that address. With that, we just go on to next steps. So we're at our second study session here. Tomorrow we'll have our workshop, and then in June we'll formally submit to HCD. Once we submit to HCD, they have 90 days to review the document and provide any comments. So once we submit for 90 days, we're not just sitting around. We'll be kicking off the safety element update as well, which we'll get into. And those changes aren't as significant as the housing element. But yeah, during that time, we'll kick that off as well. And yeah, if we have any questions, I'm here, staff's here. Yeah, we're bearing with us. I know a lot of it was repetitive.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I will say, as we have these presentations, I learn a little bit more every single time. So thank you for that. Let's open it up to public comment before we bring it back to the board and commission.
If you'd like to make a comment in chambers, please provide a speaker card. On Zoom, please press *9 with the raised hand icon. And I have no public comment.
Bringing it back to the board and the commission. Any comments, questions? Anybody interested in starting a dialogue or no questions? Oh, supervisor.
Go ahead.
There you guys go.
Yeah, forgive me if this isn't a ignorant question, but I have to assume that these pockets that are entirely within the city, if development were to occur on those pockets, it seems reasonable to assume that annexation would occur, or at least would likely occur. And so that brings us to the statement about the city and the county may make an agreement, but they also may not. What happens if the city wants more than the county is willing to give, or vice versa, and no agreement can be reached? Then the REMA numbers, I guess, remain with the party that they were originally allocated to?
That's correct.
Okay, I'm just thinking through the implication of that. All right, thank you.
And I had the same thing. I guess I'm ignorant as well. And Rich is not. He's a Jeopardy champion, so let's get that out of the way. I was at the point that he is a Jeopardy champion.
Yeah.
So basically, just because the terminology could be a little confusing. So we have infill pockets those, we have 750 or so units to basically show that we're zoning for. If those units are zoned or annexed into the city, we would still have 750. We'd have to find somewhere else to fulfill. That's or is it the other way around? That's what I'm trying to get a grasp on.
Yeah, if one of our parcels, to say that one that's kind of a pocket within the city, it's like kind of an island. If that parcel, because we're identifying in the county and it's county's jurisdiction, we are responsible for accommodating our own arena on that parcel. If the city decided they wanted to annex that parcel, they take that.
They take
arena
credit
with
for
them.
it.
Yeah, they take the arena with them, and our requirement is reduced. So our burden is reduced.
Oh, our burden is reduced. Oh, okay, that's good because they're going to have an incentive to take that from us because they have a much higher burden than we do with the 4,000 and whatnot units that they have, and they've expressed obviously some frustration with the number that they have, which we gave them that cause. They're going to have to deal with it.
Yes, Supervisor Sotelo.
So I just want to be clear, kind of piggybacking on the previous comments. So if they take it on, let's say 4,000 is their number. I know it's more than that, but let's say it's 4,000. And just for simple math, the parcel that we're looking at, that was maybe 100 on that, right? So then they go up to 4,100 and we go down to 650. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes.
Now, with that though, so I understood kind of the language if you on that slide. However, I felt like when I read down, it was almost like we could negotiate it. So they could say, okay, it's 100, we'll give you credit for 50. And it's not a 1-for-1 per se. We're gonna kind of need to negotiate that. Is that correct?
I would defer that. I would defer that to county council. I'm not too familiar with the agreements themselves.
Well, will you pull the language back up
Yeah.
on that slide? So the city and county may reach a mutually acceptable agreement for transfer of a portion of the county's allocation to the city. So to me, that seems that it's not a given that it's a 1-to-1. It could be whatever we deem acceptable between the bodies. Am I understanding that correctly?
Well, yeah, that gives you an alternative. It's couched in the language of May. So what it means usually is it's a one-to-one transfer. But if the city and the county want to negotiate a different agreement, they can.
Well, what if, I mean, for the city, why wouldn't they want to negotiate that? You know what I mean? Like, I'm thinking, like, I mean, I would think they would, okay, well, we're going to annex it in. We'll give you 50% credit. We're going to take 50% credit. I'm just thinking, like, I don't know why they would give us, you know, okay, well, we're going to decrease yours and we're going to increase ours by this 1-to-1 numbers. It just, I guess if I was sitting on the city council, I don't know that I would negotiate it that way or that I would be acceptable to that. So I just want to make sure that I'm understanding this clearly, that is it a 1-to-1 match or could it be negotiated completely different? And then, because that affects our numbers tremendously, right?
It could be negotiated differently, just don't tell them that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Secret is with us 9.
Nine.
Thank
I
you.
don't want to confuse it more, but the essentially the exchange, so the transfer of our arena, the county's arena, and transferring it over to the city would only be the amount that the county has accommodated. So, if for that parcel we identified 100 units, but then there's an agreement that the city is going to annex it, but then they actually develop 500 units on that parcel. Their arena will increase by 100, but they can take it. They could count all the units, whatever actually is developed. So then the 1-to-1 would be 5-to-1. So for them, they would develop whatever they want to develop on there, but they would still be required for at least what we had accommodated previously.
So are we not maximizing on these lots or parcels that are being identified? We didn't maximize the number that could be potentially put there. Like on some of them you have 25 to 45 or 45 to 65. What is our estimate that we're saying we're putting there?
Yeah, for almost all except the one in the north, the storage facility, yeah, it's 25 to 45, and we assume that's will reach 32 dwelling units per acre. That's the assumed like build out capacity. Even though the maximum is 45, we've assumed 32, just based off of past development, past experience. So past developments typically will develop up to 7% of the max, and that changes. But because we are going higher than the existing zoning allows, we want to make sure that our assumptions are still reasonable, because we don't want HCD to send it back and say, hey, this is unreasonable.
Thank you. Commissioner Gibson, did you have a comment?
I just had a thought. Wouldn't LAFCO rules come into play when it comes to the negotiation between the two jurisdictions? We couldn't just put our arms and say we're not gonna negotiate. The city couldn't do the same thing.
Well, the tax sharing agreement is going to be the topic of conversation, and wastewater and water. So, I mean, there's multiple layers of the negotiation, some in their interest and some in our interest. So I don't feel like it's a one size fits each parcel. Supervisor Zanger.
Yeah, so in the numbers that were just presented here, the hypothetical numbers, if it's we zone it for like 100 units, right? And then they annex it, our numbers go down by 100 regardless of how many they build there. They can just choose whether or not, and theirs could go up by 100, but they would build more, and then that would bring it down. That's why they would do it. That's their incentive, I guess.
Correct. Yeah.
And if they didn't want to, they could choose not to annex it.
Yeah. Just leave it as is, and it would stay in the county jurisdiction.
Either way, the county either checks numbers off or gets our allotment down. Either way, right?
Yeah, Supervisor Cosmicki.
So just the broader picture here, we're still incentivized to zone for zone for, not build, zone for within the city as infill, which is should be obvious that that's the smartest potential possible development that we can promote. We're still incentivized through RENA to do that, and then aligned with that, have we checked all the boxes on infill? And I know I brought that up in our last session, but that was my biggest, I think, recommendation was to make sure we're doing as much infill as we possibly can here to try to promote infill versus potential sprawl.
Yeah, we did look into maybe like 12 additional parcels. I forgot. It was I think it was 12 if I remember correctly. And out of those 12, only one ended up being added, just based off of various factors. There were some parcels that were already pre-zoned to be annexed into the city. So in that case, we can't identify those parcels just because they're already assumed. It's not official. They're just pre-zoned, but it's assumed that within a certain period they'll eventually become the city. So those are essentially quote unquote off limits. It wouldn't be feasible by HC.
And then this should be my last question. The pipeline projects, how do they fit into the RENA requirement? Can you correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like we're in a pretty good position here to fulfill our RENA without having to go too crazy building wise and to not worry about the builder remedy ramifications and whatever this one size fits all legislation that we have to do.
Yeah. The pipeline projects, they put us in a really good position. Just the San Juan Oaks project alone will satisfy all of our above moderate, and then for some of our other projects like Santana Ranch, will accommodate a significant portion of low income and some moderate income. So yeah, they're.
So I just want to make sure it's communicated to the public, because there's oftentimes this debate between, just to simplify things, pro-growth people and slow growth, or people that want more responsible growth while we're expanding our infrastructure, that this debate should be put to rest, that, if we don't approve all these new developments, we're going to be, have our hands slapped by the state, and therefore you have to approve new developments, or else, we're going to have all these repercussions. I just want to make that statement that should really be put to rest here with what we're seeing here, and what's being, at least how I'm perceiving the communication here today. That likelihood of having some sort of repercussions from HCD are essentially non-existent at this point. We just need to fill out the paperwork, get it in, and we look like we're fine. It shouldn't be controversial by any means is what I'm doing. Yeah, and it was more of a statement, I guess, but
Let's give them just a second.
yeah, they're
And while they're doing their just a second, I just want to remind everybody that one of the major goals of LAFCO, especially in the new policy updates that we're working on, is ensuring that islands are addressed, because that is the primary one of the major goals of LAFCO is getting those addressed. So there is a process there that can help us in negotiation.
Yeah, and I mean, we had a question at the hospital forum a couple days ago. Well, this new government that's coming in is going to come in and no growth, and how are we? The community's not going to grow. When the bottom line is, all these pipeline projects we're going to grow for the next 10 years. There's no bones about it. I mean, there's just none.
And any response to where he was going with it? We're in good shape, or
Yeah, so the pipeline projects, we just want to clarify that for the pipeline projects, we don't have any extremely low, very low, or low income. If they do develop and they are deed restricted, we can account for those. But if they're not deed restricted, we can't take so I want to confirm that for the pipeline projects, we don't have those.
I don't want to hog, but I think there's consensus that I don't think anybody's against low income.
Yeah, no.
And so when we get these, you got to do this 500 unit development that has, 75 low income units. You got to do it, or no? We got to focus on low income, very low income, and then we would fulfill our RENA requirements as long as we're focused on low income and providing low income housing, which is what we need.
any other comments? Looking both ways and not hearing any. My only comment is, I agree we need to really push the low and very low, but it's going to take partnerships. It's going to take a commitment from the county, and there's a lot of negotiations in affordable housing. It's not, it doesn't happen. When I hate the word affordable housing, it's the least affordable thing to build is affordable housing. I mean, just from my experience. So, with that, is there, I'm going to go back to what we've been asked of. This was receive informational presentation. It doesn't look like we had anything except for providing some feedback. Does everybody feel that they've provided adequate feedback? Okay. So with that, thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Really appreciate it. Okay, and since this is the only item on our agenda and we don't have any future items that we need to discuss right now, I'd like to thank everybody for being here today and doing this presentation. I look forward to tomorrow's. And David, just to double check, sorry, council, if we have board members and commissioners attending this meeting tomorrow on the 22nd at Payne's, if just because there may be more than two of us from one of the bodies, it is not a Brown Act violation, because we just need to not be talking to each other about how we vote or the perception of us sitting next to each other unless you have other advice. I'm sorry, can you put on your mic, please?
Yeah, the third supervisor that anybody over two can't speak at all. And I wouldn't even sit here.
Right. But we can hear and hear the public impact. I just wanted to make sure that was clear. I am going, so I'll get there early, so I'm one.
And Madam Chair, what are the appetizers on the menu for tomorrow? It's the most important one.
Okay, we do want the public to come, so those appetizers better be darn good. Okay. No, that's okay. That's okay. We're gonna end this with a little bit of smiles here. And is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, guys.